All right, we'll do the reading here. In the intro, he describes the first selection in this collection. In orientations, Evola attempted to present the post-war youth an alternative to the world they found themselves in, where the only option seemed to be the egalitarian leveling of the communist world, the stifling consumerism represented by the United States, and the Catholic moralism of Christian democracy. Orientations remains the clearest short presentation of his principles. The Italian authorities obviously agreed, for he was soon charged with violating the recently passed laws on refounding the fascist party. The police had arrested about 30 youngsters, who ranged from real but harmless rabble-rousers to more thoughtful young men who edited a right-wing journal called Imperium, Yaki, and had arranged for the publication of Orientations. Evola was arrested and tried for defending fascism, attempting to reconstitute the dissolved fascist party, and being the master and inspirer of young neo-fascists. Like Socrates, he was accused not of not worshipping the gods of democracy and of corrupting youth. So we'll go through the 11 points. Let me make two vids. 1950, orientation. There's no point, point one, point one. There's no point in indulging in wishful thinking with the illustrations of any kind of optimism. Today we find ourselves at the end of a cycle. Already for centuries, at first insensibly, then with the momentum of a landslide, multiple processes have destroyed every normal and legitimate human order in the West and falsified every higher conception of living, acting, knowing, and fighting. And the momentum of this fall, its velocity, its giddiness, has been called progress. And we have raised hymns to progress and deluded ourselves that this civilization, the civilization of matter and machines, was civilization par excellence, the one for which the entire history of the world was preordained, until the final consequence of this entire process has been such as to cause some people at least to wake up. It is well known where and under what symbols the forces for a possible resistance try to organize. On one side, a nation that, since it had been unified, had known nothing but the mediocre climate of liberalism, democracy, and a constitutional monarchy, dared to assume the symbol of Rome as the basis for a new political conception, a new idea of virility and dignity. Analogous forces awoke in a nation that in the Middle Ages had made the Roman symbol of imperium its own in order to reaffirm the principle of authority and the primacy of those values that are rooted in blood, race, and the deepest powers of a stock. And while in other European nations groups were already orienting themselves in the same direction, a third force in Asia joined the ranks, the nation of the samurai, in which the adoption of the outer forms of modern civilization had not prejudiced its fidelity to a warrior tradition centered upon the symbol of the solar empire of divine right. No one claims that there was a very clear discrimination between the essential and the accessory in these currents, that in them the idea was confronted by people of high quality who understood it, or that various influences arising from the very forces that had to be combated had been overcome. The process of ideological purification would have taken place at a later time, once some immediate and unavoidable political problems had been resolved. But even so, it was clear that a marshalling of forces was taking shape, representing an open challenge to modern civilization, both to those democracies that are the heirs of the French Revolution and to the other one, which represents the extreme limit of the degradation of Western man, the collectivist civilization of the Fourth Estate, the communist civilization of the faceless mass man. Rhythms accelerated and tensions increased until the opposing forces met in armed combat. What prevailed was the massive power of a coalition that did not draw back from the most hybridized of agreements and the most hypocritical ideological mobilization in order to crush the world that was raising itself and intended to affirm its right. Whether or not our men were equal to the task, whether errors were committed in matters of timing, preparation, or the assessment of risks, let us leave that aside. because it does not prejudice the internal significance of the struggle that was fought. Equally, it does not interest us that today history is taking its revenge on the victors, that the democratic powers, after aligning themselves with the forces of red subversion to conduct the war all the way to the senseless extremism of unconditional surrender and total destruction, today see their allies of yesterday turn on them as a danger much more frightening than the one they had wanted to exercise. The only thing that counts is this. Today we find ourselves in the midst of a world in ruins. The problem to pose is, do men on their feet still exist in the midst of these ruins? And what must they do? What can they still do? You know what? I'm going to do a vid for each point. That's right. Man, yeah, you're getting chills.